My name is Robert Singh. I'm Professor of Politics here at Birkbeck and a specialist in the politics of the United States. And I'm very pleased to be able to make this contribution to the Birkbeck Inspired series. I'm going to focus on the state of the 2020 US presidential election and the question of whether Donald Trump can secure a second term as President of the United States. Many people are assuming that that's highly unlikely. Trump has been a highly disruptive and divisive figure. His response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been poor. About 170,000 Americans have died as a result of the pandemic thus far. His approval ratings in terms of his job are in the low 40s, and 70% of Americans think that the country is on the wrong rather than the right track, all of which might suggest that he's likely to become one of those rare creatures in modern American politics, a one-term rather than a two-term president. But I think those assumptions are somewhat unsafe for three primary reasons. The first is the state of the polls. Joe Biden, Trump's Democratic opponent, has maintained a fairly steady and large lead over Trump in the polls through the summer and into the early autumn. And at a nationwide level, that's reached an average of about 7%. But the US election is not really a nationwide election. The competitive elements are really confined to a series of 6 to 8 states like North Carolina, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. And in those states, Biden's lead is lower than his nationwide one, anywhere from 2 to 4%. And indeed, if you went back to 2016, Hillary Clinton's lead over Trump in all of these states bar Florida was larger than Biden's lead is today. So there's a sense in which, even though he is ahead, Biden may be quite vulnerable. The second element is that the US presidential election is not a direct election decided by the popular vote. It's an indirect election decided by this strange device called the Electoral College. And in the Electoral College, it's states, not individuals, that matter. So the Electoral College votes are roughly proportioned according to population size, which means that small, depopulated states, Idaho, Wyoming, get as little as 3 votes. Larger states like, say, California, get 55. But with the exception of Maine and Nebraska, 48 states allocate those Electoral College votes so that even if you win the popular vote in, say, California just by 10 votes, you take all 55 Electoral College votes. What that means is that the election is really a series of 50 individual elections in the states. And to win, you need to reach 270 Electoral College votes out of the 538 available. So the second reason for caution about the prospects of Trump getting re-elected is that he could repeat what he did in 2016 when Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by over 3 million votes, about 2.5%, but lost the Electoral College. In fact, it's been estimated that a Democrat could win the popular vote by as much as 4% and still lose the Electoral College. The third reason why this is going to be an unusual election in all probability is the pandemic, which has largely kept Joe Biden at his home in Wilmington, Delaware, and it's only now, after the Democratic and Republican national conventions have concluded, that he's being tested on a day-to-day basis by the rigors of a campaign. And there is a danger that his weaknesses as a candidate, his proneness to mistakes, to gaffes, his fading memory, even when it comes to members of his own family, his tendency to say some impolitic comments may get increasingly exposed. What this all means, I think, is that the election will be decided by 2 related factors. One is simply what issues count for most voters in the key battleground states. Biden and the Democrats are trying to make the election a referendum on Trump and the incompetence which they accuse him of having led the country since 2017. Trump and the Republicans are trying, by contrast, to make the election a choice between them and the Democrats. And in that environment, it's rather ironic that Trump is portraying himself, as he did 4 years ago, as the insurgent candidate against an establishment figure. The establishment figure in 2016 was Hillary Clinton. Now it's Joe Biden, who has been in Washington since 1972. So which issues prevail is going to have a decisive effect. The Democrats want this to essentially turn on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Trump and the Republicans want this to be about the economy and about public security or law and order. The second related element then that feeds off that is which coalition is able to mobilize its base most effectively. In a hyper-partisan, highly polarized era, there really just aren't that many swing centrist voters to win over. The election is really about mobilizing each party's base. And again, for Biden, there is a question mark as to whether the Democrats will turn out for him. Polls suggest that while they support him, they do so more because of their antagonism towards Trump than because of their enthusiasm for Joe Biden. Trump, on the other side, is clearly pursuing an unabashed campaign, not just to appeal to white nationalism and to try to convince suburban women that even though they dislike him personally, they will be safer and more prosperous with him, but also to do what he can to suppress the vote of the Democrats' coalition, whether that is through trying to cut funding for the post office that actually delivers the ballots, whether it's persuading the Senate not to fund election security laws, whether it is perhaps even to encourage a so-called October surprise that may tilt the election in his favor a few days or a week away from November. We don't know. But what we do know is that this is going to be an extremely rancorous, difficult, unpleasant election, which may well not be decided on election night, but like 2000, when George W. Bush eventually prevailed against Al Gore, may take days, weeks, even months, and may ultimately be decided by the courts rather than by the voters. The question, therefore, is over the coming weeks and months through to early November, which coalition is going to be able to mobilize its base the better? I hope you've enjoyed this brief presentation, but if you'd like to learn more, please go to our website at Birkbeck, www.bbk.ac.uk. Thank you.